Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Valerie Wonder. I'm the Communications Director for Reynoldsburg City Schools. Before we do introductions, I just wanted to let you guys know we are recording this, but the presenters will be taking off their masks. We just want to make sure that the sound is clear, and they'll only be taking off their masks while they're presenting or speaking, and then they'll put their masks back on at the end of the presentation. In fact, I'm going to take mine off right now. So as I said, my name is Valerie. Thank you for coming to our town hall about the ballot issue that we have on November 2nd. I just wanted to introduce a few people before we get started. Dr. Jocelyn Cosgrave, she's our Chief Academic Officer. Mr. David Baker, he's our Assistant Superintendent. Ms. Tammy Miller, she's our Treasurer. Ms. Jamie Wilson, our HR Director. Ms. Jamie Scott and Aaron Jones from our Student Services Department. Ms. Stutz from the Historical Society, thank you for coming. And Ms. Dunlap, our Board of Education President. Oh, and Mr. Whitman, sorry, our Board of Education Vice President. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end. Again, because this is being recorded, we definitely want people to ask questions that maybe haven't been asked before, or if somebody's going back and watching it, they'll think, oh, I didn't think of that. And because of that, we also have some staff members from Hanna Ashton in case you have Hanna Ashton specific questions. Ms. Ashley Pittman, Ms. Erin Betzko, and Mr. Hunter Haswell, I'm sorry. So I'm going to introduce our Executive Director of Business, Mr. Chris Reed, and Superintendent Dr. Brown, and they are going to go walk you through a little presentation. Thank you for coming.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Obviously, we're here to talk about a ballot initiative we have in front of us to give us an opportunity to make an impact on what our future looks like, and we're going to go through some of the specifics of that today, in addition to answering some of your questions. We'll start, though, with what our mission statement always is: empowering leaders to impact the now and innovate the future. We start every meeting with that moniker because that's what we live by. We want to make sure our students are able to, and I shouldn't say just our students, because when we're talking about leaders, we're talking about everyone, having an opportunity to impact the now and innovate the future. Talking about our current situation. So our current district facilities kind of dictate some of the things that we're able to do. If you think about where we are right now, we're in the gym, and of course this is where we have physical education. You can look around the top of the facade. You'll see some damage that Mr. Reed's going to talk about a little bit later. But it gives you a sense that being in certain spaces, we're not able to do a full scale, whatever it is we want to do with kids in spaces such as this. This is the biggest space in Hanna Ashton, and we still can't get all our kids in here at once. We can't hold mass arenas of conversations with parents in this space. So that's part of the reason we want to have a conversation about that. In addition to that, some of our school-specific spaces don't allow us to give kids access to the types of programs we want to be able to continue to give them. And when we say give them, we mean all of them. We want all of our kids to have those opportunities. We're facing serious critical facility needs. We're going to walk you through a lot of that tonight. You'll see some of that in the building. We also have some images on our website that you can reference. And I think it's pretty obvious. When you look up and see that corner, that brick that you see, that's actually the exterior brick that Mr. Reed is going to talk about a little bit later. And we know that our students deserve to have an equitable opportunity to access programs and any sorts of things we want to make sure we build for their success going forward. This is part of the reason we're coming forward to have this ballot initiative. So talking about the plan for our future, this is the basis of what we're talking about with this particular ballot initiative. First of all, responding to the needs in this particular facility. In case you weren't aware, this building is 153 years old. On the grounds outside, we actually had the 100th anniversary of the inauguration of George Washington as president. I don't know about you, when I first heard that, it blew my mind, that the fact that happened in front of this building. Aligning our facilities to our mission. We spoke of our mission earlier. We want to make sure our facilities line up with what that mission actually is. And then personally, for me, the biggest thing that I'm most excited about is the notion of having full day kindergarten for all of our students. so they can come to school, have a full day experience, not only from a social standpoint, but obviously to build their academic skills so they can be successful and go toward starting to fulfill the tenets of our portrait of a graduate. You want to jump on those?
Absolutely. So Dr. Brown said we're inside of Hanna J Ashton Middle School, 153 years old. I will say, and we'll get into this a little bit more as we go on, what you see on the outside is not the original. The original was overlaid in 1925. And we're going to get into some pictures, and the Historical Society has provided some amazing pictures for everyone to see outside in the entryway. But when we look at a building, and not just this building, but all buildings, we look at the cost to maintain that building in the sense of roofing, facade, everything inside, whether that's electrical, fire, ADA, all those things. 3 years ago, we got a cost from our architect of record, and that cost was just under $18 million. That was 3 years ago. We can imagine where that cost is now. It is obviously above that. I know that the roofing, this entire building needs a new roof, not just part of it, the entire building. 3 years ago, that was $8 million. Excuse me, $5 million. The facade is $3 million, so between the two, that's $8 million. And again, that's 3 years ago. That's a lot of money for a building that is this old. And again, fixing it to that $18 million plus really gets us about 5 to 10 years. You know, all of our districts, all of our buildings in the district are on a cycle of facade work, roof work, pavement work, those types of things. This one is just a little bit unique because of its age. Some other things that we might be able to see later on, that $18 million doesn't take care of some things that are just foundationally wrong with this building. If you're a young lady on the 3rd floor taking class, you have to go down to the 2nd floor to use the restroom. Every step that you have to go down those steps and into that restroom is time out of the classroom. Classroom time is why we're here. And that's just one example. We have ADA issues, we've got internet issues, we've got plumbing issues. We've got a whole slew of things wrong with this building. And the reason why we always say more than 18 million is because I know once we start uncovering some problems, we're going to find more. For instance, 3 years ago, a week before school started, it was, and we'll go up there and see on the 2nd and 3rd floor, the floor tile popped up, rolled up kind of like Massey's pizza pepperoni. And we thought to ourselves, yeah, got some head shaking over here. They probably saw it and were like, oh crap. We had to take very quick action. By we, I mean the Board of Education took very quick action to get that replaced. But one of the things we found when we pulled that tile up is the underlayment, the underboard, was not marine grade. So there's an example of we found more wrong than just the tile. So that's just an example. So we're going to go through some pictures here. Dr. Brown talked about the brick here that you can see. On a sunny day, you can see outside. We have an extra window up there. Everything you see in these pictures is what we call water infiltration. That means the water comes in and goes wherever it wants. This is a failure of the exterior facade. Again, 3 years ago, that was a $3 million price tag to replace the vast majority of our facade, of our brickwork. We'll go back to Dr. Brown.
So if you're talking about aligning our facilities to our mission, so when you go upstairs, you're going to see some classrooms that are not conducive to kids in the 21st century in terms of size and the types of classrooms we put together, the technology that goes in the classrooms. You're going to see some really small spaces that don't accommodate what a typical class might look like. So why is it important that we address these things now? As you guys are fully aware, our economy and our country and our world continues to evolve, and if we're not preparing our kids for that, we're doing them a disservice. In the same time, we're doing ourselves a disservice because I know they're going to be taking care of us in years ahead. I tell my kids all the time, make sure you take care of me. So I want them to get whatever they can now. So we want to put them in spaces where they're also able to collaborate and create and work together and have synergy that business and industry is also looking for in terms of skills that kids have when they come to those industries to work. We're in a space where K-12 education isn't what it used to be, where we just prepare kids for college. we're preparing kids for a work world as well. And that's crucially, it's vital to our success as a country that we prepare them in that way and give them opportunities to make choices of their own that they're interested in doing. We talk all the time about making sure kids get experiences so they can determine what they may want to do when they get older. I believe it's just as important that they get experiences that tell them what they don't want to do. So we want to be able to provide those things for all of our kids. This is you and me.
Either. Rock, paper, scissors? Okay. So aligning facilities to our mission. Obviously, Dr. Brown talked a little bit about an early learning center. This early learning center would be a pre-K and K building. It would service the entire district. This building would look very different in the sense of, I can look at my own family. I've got 3 kids. My 8-year-old, she's in 3rd grade, but when she got to preschool and kindergarten, it was very big for her. You know, she's got an IEP, she's got some issues that she deals with in a great way, but it was very big for her. So when we think about a gymnasium that we're in right now, does a preschool and kindergarten need a big gymnasium like this? The answer is no. We can have a more functional space. Our classrooms can be more functional. Our group areas can be more functional. There's a lot of things we can do to really enhance that preschool and kindergarten experience so that when they get to 1st grade, they are 100% ready for 1st grade. Part of this as well, and we're going to get into this a little bit deeper towards the end of the presentation, is with these buildings, these proposed buildings, this would bring 5th grade back into the elementary.
Can I jump on that one?
Absolutely.
So if you think about the way typical schools are structured, you usually have a K-5, a 6-8, 9-12. That's usually how elementary through middle school looks. Because of our space issues throughout the district, and this was determined some years back, 5th grade was moved out of elementary school into middle school because that's the space that could accommodate it. And that's just a matter of things that people had to do at that point based on space. We know academically, socially, emotionally, there's a huge span between a 5th grader and an 8th grader in the same building. We are very anxious to get 5th grade back in elementary school. So from a developmental perspective, we have an opportunity for them to have a better experience. In addition to that, they can be huge, tremendous role models for our kindergarten and 1st grade students if we're taking advantage of those opportunities to get them back in elementary school. I think it'll help their development, it'll help their academic success, it'll help their social success. That's something we are very interested in doing. So with full day kindergarten, I think it speaks for itself. Additional space gives us the opportunity to have every single one of our kids who comes through in kindergarten have a full day experience. Currently, we have 2 buildings that house full day kindergarten, Rose Hill Elementary and French Run. Those are our 2 Title I buildings, our most needy buildings, which is why those programs are there. But our desire is for that to be there for everyone. And if we could, we would do this tomorrow if we had the space. We don't have the space to do that. We simply couldn't accommodate it. So it's important that we're able to get that additional space so that that half-day program can morph into a full-day program for all of our kids. Why now? Educational benefits we talked about. Support for families. I know families are struggling financially to pay for daycare. I can imagine being a parent of a kindergartner and dropping my child off in the morning, having to go pick them up at 12, and then figure out what I'm going to do with them between 12 and 4 or 5 because I got to go back to work. We want to be able to take that burden off of parents, give them to us all day. And you can be at work, do your thing so you can take care of your family, and we can give our kids a very, very good experience from a kindergarten perspective. We talked earlier about social emotional development. Having a full day and giving them an opportunity to acclimate to school only is going to make them more successful as they navigate all throughout their scholastic experience. And in early intervention, we have a growing need, if you will, of students with special needs. We've got to continue to expand those programs so that kids continue to get services that they desperately need. This additional space would allow us to do that. And to have a facility, an early learning center set up specifically for children of that age is only going to help us do that even better.
So what if it passes? The picture on your right shows obviously our property out at Summit. We have plenty of land. If this were to pass, we would be constructing a new middle school. That middle school would be between 800 to 1,000 students. And I'll get to the early learning center here in a moment, the next slide. We talked about full day kindergarten. And again, the upgrade electrical and technology systems provide flexible learning spaces. We'd be consolidating district offices. So our district office at East Main, that property we would be selling, and there would be an additional floor put on to the Early Learning Center, which would be central office. That won't be hard to sell. We get calls quite often. It's a very, very hot piece of real estate. And then also the bond will create a permanent improvement fund, which is something that is funds that I control that help us do those things I mentioned earlier on an annual basis. Facade, roofing, paving, whatever else needs done in that building, we can get those things done. I call that summer projects. So again, looking at the land on the left, that is our Summit campus. I've outlined the high school just to give us an idea of how big this space is between this building and Graham Road. Obviously, if you were to just drop it right there, you take out some swings and things like that, but it just shows the sheer size of that space. That space in between this building and Graham Road is where the Early Learning Center would be, which quite frankly, I can't think of a better place because I kind of see this as the kind of the nucleus of Reynoldsburg. That's why this building was built back in 1868 in this location, because it was the center of town. What if it fails? Well, if it fails, we have to dump 18 million plus into this building to keep it where it needs to be for our students. What that means, it draws funds away from academics. We won't be able to expand to full day kindergarten. And as a side note, just to keep things completely transparent, most of us already know that we have preschool out of our elementary schools, and they're at Livingston right now. In their own little area. It's also occupied a little bit by Columbus State, but they have that space all to themselves. Just shows that we are running out of space at the elementary level. Fifth grade would stay where they currently are, at the middle schools. And obviously Dr. Brown talked about the pros and cons of that. And then we'd continue to face the same barriers that we have. So some details in the bond. This is our first bond issue in 13 years. That's pretty good. This is a 4.9 mil bond and PI issue. And what we mean by that is the bond itself is a 3.91 bond. The permanent improvement is a 1.0. Together, it's not a pass one or the other. It's an all or nothing. And we kind of discussed what that would do. One would be straight up for building. We'd be able to move into the PI if we needed to build those buildings. Anything left over would be pushed into a permanent improvement fund that then myself or anyone that would follow me would use to keep these buildings up and running. Obviously, November 2 is Election Day. Please vote. We're here to educate you. I hope that you make an informed decision, and whatever that decision is, as long as it's informed, I'm okay with that. I have comfort in that. And then lastly, and we'll get into this a little bit more, what does this cost the community, the voters? So per $100,000 of value would cost $14.29 per month. We'll get into that here in a minute. I don't want to repeat myself.
Really quick, I want to jump on something. So Chris said that this is our first bond issue in 13 years. In most districts, that looks like 3 to 5 years. So having Tammy Miller as our treasurer, she's done a phenomenal job during the time that she's been here, and I pay homage to her because she's retiring in December, and I'm going to miss her, just like all the rest of us will. But she's done a fantastic job of helping us maintain our finances, so we're in a point that we can always be solvent and do things productively for our students. We've been responsible with our funds. So to not come back to the ballot for 13 years in Central Ohio, it's pretty unheard of. So I think, it's due. The time has come, but I'm glad we've been able to push this out about as far as we possibly can.
So looking at some frequently asked questions, how does this impact your budget? So let's dive a little deeper into that. Again, 35% of your home value is actually the taxable amount, which means that per $100,000 of value, it's $14.29 per month. What that looks like right now with the market is in this community, a house that is valued at $175,000 through the auditor of state, you can probably sell your house for $250,000 right now. It's a seller's market. That figure is based off of the auditor of state, not market value. So in this situation of a $175,000 house, that would cost about $25 per month. A question that we commonly get, and quite frankly, I'm glad I don't get it that often, those questions go to our treasurer, is how are we funded? I'll just go by color. So the purple is our state funding. That's about 40% of our revenue. 33%, the yellow, is our taxes. The green is 9% is federal funding, and the rest is our non-tax local, which is 18%. Again, our last bond issue was in 2008. Our last operating issue was in 2010. Again, just to be complete, I've lived in districts they are on the ballot every 3 years, like clockwork, for an operating fund. So the fact that Tammy and the rest of the staff have been able to keep us in this position since 2010 is quite frankly pretty unheard of. Open enrollment, I'll talk a little bit about this and then Dr. Brown can jump in quite frankly whenever he wants. I want to be very clear about open enrollment. Open enrollment only means that when we look at a classroom, we only fill seats that are not being sat in by a Reynoldsburg resident. So for instance, if we think about a second grade classroom, that fits 25, but we've got 20. If we've got 3 open enrolled or 3 second graders that want to open enroll into the district, we have space. So we open that up for them. We can get a little bit into the cap, but essentially we have been a capped district, which means after a certain point every year, that's kind of hard to find, we don't get any additional funding for in-district students. So if you think about how we've grown over the past several years, we don't get additional funding for those kids. The reason why we do open enrollment, like I said before, when we bring in kids from outside the community to fill empty seats, we get full money for that. And that money doesn't just go towards that student, that goes towards all students, to the tune of $3.5 million last year for instruction. And to equate that $3.5 million over to an operating levy, that would be a $4 million operating levy. So open enrollment has been a very good source of revenue for this district solely to provide academic experiences to all kids, not just the open enrollment kids. I'm sure I missed something.
Yeah, I think you said it all.
I've been listening with 2 ears. District alignment. Work with me here. This is a little detailed, but maybe not. So when we pulled the district a while back, and by district I mean community, one of the biggest things that people said was, we know that our elementary schools are overcrowded. So far in the presentation, we've talked about an early learning center for pre-KK and a middle school. Obviously, some people might think, well, what happened to the elementary? So here we go. Preschool and kindergarten would obviously be in the early learning center. Pending board approval, we're kind of naming that the Hanna J Ashton Early Learning Center. And from a design standpoint, pending obviously a passage on November 2nd, that building would be designed to pay homage to the 1868 version of Hanna J Ashton, but because of its size, we could also pay homage to the 1925 version of Hanna J Ashton. There's a lot of things that we can do to pay homage to this building throughout the years. The elementary level, we would actually be adding 1 building to our elementaries, which would make it 7. And how would we do that? We would be converting Wagner Road Middle School into an elementary school. And when I say convert, if you were to walk in to that building and not be told that it's a middle school, it looks like an elementary school. When we look at the size of chairs, the size of desks, the size of toilets, the height of sinks, those types of things. So conversion is actually very simple. The next level is obviously middle school. That would be grades 6 to 8. We would have 3 of those. Baldwin, Wagner Road Junior would be a 6 to 8 building, and then obviously the new building out at Summit. which again, the naming of that is for the board. And then the thing that's not listed on here is obviously high school. High school would stay the same. 2 campuses, a 9X, Summit, and Livingston campuses. And we like to end this with a picture of the 1868 version of this building. And this is the picture that Dr. Brown referenced earlier, the 100th anniversary of the inauguration of President George Washington. Very, very interesting picture. Myself, as a operations person, a construction person, when I see this building, I kind of get chills because it's got such ornate architecture. It's a shame that it got covered up. So this would be something that we would look at replicating. I will say, again, pending passage on November 2nd, I kind of selfishly would try to be pulling for a bell tower. That's just me, maybe because the church I grew up in had a bell tower, and I was allowed to ring it every now and again. But the bell tower for this building was very important. They would ring that bell when it was time for school, time for church, time for events, time for weddings, all those things. So a bell tower would be pretty cool. So that being said, did I miss anything?
I'll say one last thing about design before we take questions. When we would actually go in the phase of designing these buildings, pending November 2nd being successful, the community would help us do that. We want input from the community about what they look like, what goes into them, what colors schemes are we going to use, how can we pay homage to Hanna J Ashton. We will want that input, and there'll be lots of committees to make that happen. That's actually the fun part of any type of building project that you're doing. Being able to dream and wish and pray and hope and look at certain things that you might want to see in a building and try to make that come to fruition. That's exciting. I'll also say we're partnering with the Historical Society to help us replicate some of the historical portions of what we're looking at right now, this building. There are a lot of historical pieces here that we can either utilize or we can mimic them in a new building by doing, basically replicating what you might see. Chris talked about that particular building and being able to pay homage to that. That's a gorgeous building. To have an opportunity to make something that's similar to that is pretty exciting. So that's part of what this would look like as well. I guess at this point we're ready for questions. Well,
hi, my name is Mike Wakeman. I have 2 questions. First one is, usually a bond levy is followed by an operating levy. So where are we with operating to the buildings so they don't sit empty after they're built? Mm-hmm. And how soon would an operating levy have to follow after that?
Great question. If we were to have no building project right now, we would probably be looking at an operating, trying to push this out at least 4 years. So let's say we are successful in November. We're going to take our funds and be as responsible as we possibly can and push that out as far as we can. Tammy, we're estimating like 25, 26?
So the operating levy, the operating expenses that we have now would cover the new building?
Correct.
Yes. Yeah. So when we look at both of these buildings, we would be taking people, by people I mean staff and students, out of current buildings and moving them to new buildings. So the bond and the operating levy, 2 different influences on when those take place.
And the second question I had, I thought I heard you say selling. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear what
Ms. Miller said that we're waiting on our state funding. So like we know in our world that we don't exactly know what that's going to be. So we are waiting on that.
The second question was, I thought you had mentioned that you were going to sell the current central offices and put a second story on top of the current Graham Road?
No. So we would sell the current 7244 East Main, but there would be an additional story on top of the Early Learning Center. Graham Road would be demolished. This building would also be demolished. Okay. That's something that when I met with, I see a few of them in here, Mary and some others. It's a bittersweet feeling, but when we look at what the kids of this district need, this building, we can do a better job of not only honoring this building, but also honoring its namesake with a new building and keeping and having them involved in that design. that's a better way to go about it than a building right now that's just almost untenable. So
I'll add to that a little bit. From an efficiency standpoint, currently our district offices are in two different buildings, half on on Main Street, half at Graham Road. This would consolidate everyone into one building, which efficiency-wise would be wise. Thank you.
thank you.
It's hard walking down those steps with the mask on. I'm John Syriac, and first I'd like to thank you for this. This is the second presentation I've attended, so thank you, and all the district people reaching out to the citizens. And so
Thank you.
I just would like to share with the people here how open the school officials have been to me personally, so it's been really nice. Also, I'd like to just comment, being an educator of 50 years, putting the 5th grade in the elementary building, yeah, that's, so I'm glad you're going to do that. That's really important. I was at the middle school for lots of years, and 5th grade doesn't belong there. So I had a question for Mr. Reed. Can you comment on how, I just learned about this, the Ohio School Facility Commission might have funding if our new building has a LEED certification? I don't know if you can comment on that and explain what a LEED certification is. And then also, being a science teacher, I want to come to one of those other meetings, because if this passes and the building goes in, a state-of-the-art science lab rooms for the middle school is, I would just say, is incredibly important.
And that won't look like the science labs that we probably experienced in school ourselves.
No, all right. So just on the
Sure.
on the
So-
LEED certification and possible funding
Sure.
from that.
Right. The way the OFCC works is because our last buildings used co-funding with the OFCC, and I can't exactly remember the split. Was it 52 and 48? Roughly 52% funded by the state, 48% funded by the district. Because we did that, that pushed our ceiling out to a much higher number that we would have to have from a district size standpoint. I'd have to look, because I've met with them several times, but I want to say that we would have to have enrollment of, it's either 8,400 or 8,600 students for 3 years in a row before they'll even consider putting Reynoldsburg City Schools on the list. So it's a long ways out, a long ways out.
And when you talk about being put on the list, there's a pecking order on that list as well, so there'd be other districts way ahead of us.
Yeah.
That's where I was going to go
Absolutely.
next.
LEED certified has nothing to do with the OFCC. It's just something the OFCC wants. It is a building standard, and I will say that there are some standards that are even more stringent than LEED. But yes, LEED is a very important thing. It's a very normal thing with schools, yes.
Hello.
Hi, Mary.
Hi. My question is, once you demolish this building, by the way, if they scoot those stools back about 30 feet, they're sitting in the 1868 structure. If you demolish this building, what happens to this land right here? I know you're going to build next to it.
Sure.
Or behind it or wherever. What happens to this land right here?
So that's a great question. Part of that is part of the discussions that we would have with staff and community in regards to design. You know, when I look out the front of this building, I see some really old trees that I don't want to see go. One of the things that's very typical when you have a construction and deconstruction is some of that deconstructed space becomes parking lot. But there's a lot of things that we could do.
So you plan on keeping the land in as open,
The land would be our
zoned
land.
open for schools?
Yes,
Because there's talk that you're going to sell this portion off.
absolutely not.
There's been no discussion of that, no.
Okay.
We want to
I
maintain
gotta
it,
set these
because there's
people
not
at
a
City
need for
Hall
us to do that.
straight. I'm hearing all this stuff from City Hall. Okay, well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Neil Whitman, Board Vice President. I'm going to pass on a couple of questions that I've heard from people. And one is that with the $82.5 million that this would bring in if it were passed, some are wondering do we have some kind of ballpark estimates, like how much would be for the Early Learning Center and how much for the new middle school and how much for the for the, for the permanent improvement?
Sure. So early estimates for the Early Learning Center / Combined Central Office are between 40 and 45 million. The early estimates for the middle school of 800 to 1,000 students are 32 to 36 million. So doing that math, whatever is remainder would be left over for the permanent improvement.
Okay, thank you. And looking at that that picture there, and you said, that the architecture is amazing, and it's a shame that it was covered up. I can't even picture where that arch would be in this building. Was that taken down, or is it somewhere in here still covered that we could see?
If Mary doesn't know, what I will tell you is this building, so the demolition of Graham Road will be very quick. The demolition of this building will be very slow. We know that there are time capsules. That was very popular during the time that this was built. We want to see what's underneath. I would love to see that. I would love to see some of those arches. I'd love to see some of that brick still standing, some of that glass. It might still be there. So we know that some of the walls were demolished because it was right over here where these are, but it would be a slow demolition.
But I mean, that bell tower, that definitely is not hidden.
No, the bell tower is not hidden. No,
Okay, so that
it's
was
gone.
demolished years ago.
It is gone, yes.
Okay. And yeah, actually, I get that. That's the main things I have. But I will. I see we have former board member Jim Sloniker here in the audience. So nice to see you, Jim. Welcome.
I'm going to pose a question that I heard while I was out knocking doors that other people may have as well. What is, because I don't think we talked about it tonight, what is the time frame for working on these buildings? Are they going to be done simultaneously before demolition? And would we be using any modulars or moving kids around in the meantime?
Modulars are a bad word to me. So the next thing that's coming, and I'm not going to go through every single step, but the next thing that is coming is the construction manager at risk. We are evaluating or interviewing in 2 weeks. I want to say 2 weeks. Yes, the 11th. We are interviewing on the 11th. Obviously, we've already chosen an architect. This is for our construction company. Pending November 2, there's a long process. If you'd like to see the timeline, I can provide that. But these buildings would be built simultaneously for open for the August of 2024. Obviously, there would be some move-in time there. The timeline allows for that. So August of 2024. If I'm doing my math right, that's the 25 school year.
Ready to tour?
I will say that when we do leave the bleachers, we are going to go outside this door right here, door 10, because I can show a lot of some of what's wrong with the outside.
How will it affect us? Like, my driveway is in this alley. There are several driveways.
This alley right here?
Yeah. We're just curious how that's going to affect us.
Well, because it's an alley and a legal street, or legal alley, you can't block that.
Okay.
So one of the great things about our architect, and there's many architects like this, they're very cognizant of that. There have been much more difficult situations that schools have been built on and deconstructed than what we see.
We were just curious because even the parking lot is actually an alley. The alley sign is in the parking lot, which is how I usually do.
So one of the nice things about this location is that we've got Graham Road and Jackson. And speaking with the city, Jackson will be renovated, widened. Maybe not widened, but renovated. New lights, new street lights, and all those things.
Right.
So we can utilize both, probably better than we are now. Obviously, bus entrance, parent entrance, that type of thing, we want those to be separate.
Right.
So, no, we are not, our plan is to not mess with Broadway or the alley, or any property along this.
Okay. That was our curiosity because, like you did say, deconstruction does make a mess. Yes. And that was a big question. Thank you so much. You're welcome.
So I think everyone that's going to come out is out here, or they're just chit-chatting. Very quickly, obviously this right here we can see is on this side is what's visible. You can see a lot of the mortar is deteriorated. As we look up, you'll see very porous brick. The same thing with mortar. We estimate about 60% of our brick needs to be replaced. We looked into some sealers, some sprays. We even looked at that stuff you see on TV, like the rhino lining for your house. Not going to work. When we turn this way, this section of wall, exterior wall, shows a lot. So we can see this part over here that sticks up and how it's leaning. That's because there's been a lot of degrading of the brick in the facade. We can see a lot of water infiltration. Right over here, where it starts coming out to the east, we can see that top concrete section. That was not flashed properly. Now, ironically, for the time, it was flashed properly, but it wasn't a singular piece of flash that went over both interior and exterior. So what's happening is when it rains, water's actually seeping through that concrete and going right in between. That's why we have so much damage in our classrooms, is because the water's going to go where it wants to go. So that's, like I said, we have that all throughout the outside of the building. And quite frankly, we can't do anything with the inside of the building until we fix the outside. As some of you may know, or all of you may know, we completed a facade project out at Livingston last year because of a similar situation. We had a lot of water infiltration with our EFS. We took care of that. Because we took care of it on the outside, we were able to go in and fix the inside. And that's a great process. But this is just a small example. There are ample amounts of time when it rains. These downspouts don't do us any good. Like Mary said, when it rains, we get a lot of waterfall here. And unfortunately, when it rains, sometimes it rains in some of our classrooms. I will say, we didn't touch on this earlier, this building is to code. Health code, fire code, all those things. It is safe for students. It's just, there's going to be a time where either we vacate the building or Hanna J Ashton is going to vacate us. So that's kind of where we're at with the building. So, any questions about out here? Perfect. We'll actually head inside and head to a classroom. And anywhere else about that. So. Where are my My two least favorite buildings in this district are Southern. We would do our best to make it all look the same, but you're more traditional.
This used to be a classroom until the damage got done, so we can't have class in here anymore, so. Water came down, it's bad back there. So all the electricity back there we can't use, so this is no longer a usable classroom.
So one of the things that if we looked in every classroom would be very similar to this. You might see a few that don't have it. It obviously looks a little bit better below the ceiling than above the ceiling. It is plaster, so we don't have a mold issue. But you can see external brick. Obviously there's a couple layers, but the water's getting wherever it wants to go.
Have you fixed the initial water problem? Incoming water problem?
The only way to fix that is $8 million. $8 million to fix that. That was the price 3 years ago. That's new roof, new facade. Yeah.
So if the levee don't pass, you're just gonna keep letting the water come in?
No, if the ultimate end of the levy is that it doesn't pass, then we have to hire a construction company and an architect to come in, and we've got to put it out to bid and find out, who's going to do all this work.
So what do you cut if you don't get the levy?
Thankfully, that's not my decision. I can tell you historically what happens in districts that have a situation similar to this and levies don't pass is you have larger class sizes because you have less teachers.
And at that point, would you not have open enrollment? That seems conflicting.
In the sense of?
Just to to say we're overcrowded, but we have open enrollment. I understand there's funding and
Sure,
income.
sure. Again, I can't comment on that. It would be specific to, a lot of numbers would have to be crunched on that. Because the funding formula for the state is also changing. So we're seeing that being a little more accommodable to public schools. But that's a decision that we'll have to kind of traverse when we get to that. So, any questions about this? But as you can see, we don't really do anything with making it look pretty above the ceiling. But that's, it's unfortunate to say, but it is what it is. So.
What kind of classroom was this?
This was a music room.
Music is the strongest.
That's what it was last year, and then the year before that, they did math and science in here.
So you can see the placard behind you says maximum occupancy 27. Ideally, a classroom that is built in the last 10 to 20 years says about 42 to 45. That's not that you put in that many, but you have the space for that many. Obviously fitting 27, well, I guess it'd be 26 students and one teacher in here. Even pre-COVID, that was too many. So we have a lot of classrooms this size in this building that are just not big enough. And you know better than I do.
Yeah, I mean, that's, if we would walk down the entire hallway this way, that's how big these classrooms are. If we go down to the second floor, it's the same way. There's only 2 classrooms up here that's very big. I'm lucky enough to have one of the classrooms. It's on that side of the building, but I have all of the like the air ducts on top of my classroom. So as I'm teaching in there, my room's shaking. So my kids are like, "What is that noise?" And the floor does shake sometimes. So it's very, it's very interesting. I love this building. Like I've taught here my whole life. So I'm halfway through my teaching career, but it's seen a lot of wear and tear. So for me, it's gonna stink to not be here. But at some point, I know, like, I'm gonna have to go somewhere else. Like, if we go 5th grade, I'll have to go. But Hanna Ashton I love Hanna Ashton, but it's an environment for some students that, it's 3 floors all the time, 4 times a day. Our 5th graders have to walk up those stairs. So our transitions are kind of longer, and that takes away some of our teaching time.
Any other questions?
I might have missed this when I was coming in. When did this all happen? You said there were students in here last year in music class.
This is an annual problem.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Last year, halfway through the year, we had to change rooms up. So this was a classroom until last year.
You still have to flush out the cast iron pipes.
Yeah, our plumbing, our sewer lines, we have 2 leading out of this building, and we have to flush them pretty constantly because cast iron corrodes. It's kind of like paint in a sense. It gets a lot of corrosion inside, and we have to flush that out because they're also not big enough. They're about, I think they're 8-inch, which if you build a building these days, they're a minimum 12. I mean, some of our newer buildings are even much larger than that. So, yes, that's a problem. That's a problem. You know, as you see going through the buildings, you don't see electrical outlets or electrical lines inside the walls. It's outside. In some cases, it's also our plumbing lines as well that are exposed because we can't get it in the wall. So.
Something that was mentioned last time too is the water isn't always on the 3rd floor. We've seen it on the 2nd and 1st floor classrooms. So as that goes down, I guess we had Renee Coley here last time. She's seen it rain in her classroom that's on the 2nd floor.
Most of the classrooms up here, we had that really, really bad rain. I think it was the day before school started, and it rained in through the windows. So the seals will break in every single classroom on this floor the day before. We were all flooded up here, and then it dropped down to the 2nd floor, and then it hit the 1st floor.
Well, we could go classroom to classroom, but what you're gonna see is very similar to what this room is. This is the floor where we don't have a female restroom. So if you just think about it, as you're walking back down to the second and first floor, just think about that waste of time that the young ladies have to waste to get to the restroom, so. Again, thank you very much. A little somber in here, because obviously seeing this, but thank you very much. I hope that, if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or anyone else, and hope we see you on November 2.
Jacob, yes.
Thank you.